And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. So friends, today we're going to talk about niche marketing. More specifically, we're going to dive into this question that came about, and that is, when is the right time for me as a business owner to consider or to explore this idea of niche marketing? Now, over the last few episodes, maybe the last 10 episodes or so, we've been dealing specifically with the financial advisory practice. So many of you who listen to the podcast are financial advisors who own your own businesses. And as such, we've been trying to take this angle to help you achieve your 8-figure exit. Perhaps you're not a financial advisor. That's okay. The content of today's episode will be directly applicable to you and your business. I can remember my very first client. Can you? I can still see the moment when they made the appointment and then entered the office to meet with me. I was in my early 20s. I didn't know anything in the financial world, but yet they came, they laid their heart on the table. They told me where they wanted to be. And then I took my little bit of training I had and began trying to craft them a retirement plan, a financial plan. Some 20 years later, they're still a client. And in hindsight, we now laugh and we chuckle about what were they thinking to walk into the office in their mid-50s and me in my early 20s and then trust me, a 20-year-old, with their future. In the early days of our businesses, especially those of us who are founders, man, we'll work with anybody and everybody. Anybody who would fog a mirror, we'd work with them. Perhaps you went out and bought a practice and now you're looking at the book and you're saying, oh my goodness, I like working with this type of client, but I really don't care for this type of client. That's okay. There comes a certain point to where we begin questioning ourselves saying, should we begin niching? Should we begin maybe working with a particular demographic, a particular type of client? How do we know though? How do we know when the right time for us as business owners to begin niching the types of clients that we want to work with? The best way for me to describe it is it's a feeling. It's a feeling. Obviously, before I dive into the data, obviously we can take a business plan and we can say, hey, I'm only going to work with, and then list out your 15 or 20 different credentials in your early phases of business. But most of us don't think that way. Most of us begin working with anybody and everybody, and then we find ourselves working with a hodgepodge of people, and we reach this feeling of, are we doing it right? Look, there are two signs for us as business owners, specifically for the financial advisory business owners. Again, if you're not a financial advisor, perhaps you find these same emotions in your own business, and that's okay if you do. But there are two signs that we as financial advisors can lean into to say, hey, maybe we should, just maybe we should go out and niche. The first sign is we're feeling drained by clients. Drained. I can remember when this happened to me, the very first time. I can remember it. I know I've talked about it on the podcast before. My daughter is being born. She's actually up in Children's Hospital. We had been working to try to get me some time off for my wife with our very first daughter be born, and I had blocked my calendar really heavy, and I was going to take 2 or 3 weeks off after her due date, and then lo and behold, Savannah Marie decided to bless us with her presence about a month early. Totally ruined my plans. As a planner, it just blew my mind that, hey, a baby can come a month early. But here she was, she came out, and since then she's been running. But I can remember the very first time whenever I thought, this client is draining me. It was right after she was born. I can remember sitting at the conference room table and thinking to myself, I don't want to work with this individual. It wasn't that the individual themselves was a bad person. It wasn't it. In fact, I've seen this individual many times over the last 2 decades now. And we're still cordial, we're still friendly, and a great person, got a great family and a great business. But at that time, they were draining to me in my personality. Our personalities weren't aligned. Our hobbies weren't aligned. Our directions weren't aligned. The way we communicated. There's so many things that just were draining to me. In fact, there was a study done through the Australian Finance Advisor Wellbeing Report that revealed that nearly 75% of advisors, 75% of financial advisors report high levels of burnout due to client draining, due to the client emotions that we deal with. Now, interestingly enough, Financial Planning Magazine reports that the stress levels for financial advisors are about 25% higher than the national averages for other careers. So we as financial advisors, we carry this stress, we carry this burden that whenever we're working with our clients that many other professions don't have. I can remember my mom who worked for decades in nursing. I can remember her coming home at night just weeping, her heart breaking because of the people that she was entrusted to care for. I can remember her just being turmoiled over the grieving of doctors, people who were having to break bad news to families or having to make decisions that were just impacting lives. And I can remember just seeing it on her face, the amount of stress that particular segment, the medical field, faces day in, day out. The financial advisory space, the financial space is not that dissimilar. Sure, we're often not making life or death decisions, but nonetheless, the decisions or the guidance that we provide to clients have very similar impacts on their quality of life or on their well-being. Financial Planning Magazine went a little deeper and they started breaking things down. They reflected that we male advisors, those men who are advisors out there, we carry a 26.2% higher stress rate than other male employees within the workplace. And female advisors have about an 18% higher stress load than their counterparts within the workplace. So as financial advisors, we carry this heavy burden. We carry this burden. There was a study done by Adhesion Wealth Advisor Services that identified that the major stressor for financial advisors, in fact, 83% of advisors identified this as the major stressor, and it was this: their responsibility for shouldering the client's financial future. The responsibility for shouldering the client's financial future. Financial advisors, you know what I'm talking about. How many times have we sat down across the table for somebody we care deeply about, a client, that we know their dreams, we know their aspirations, we know the things that just keep them up at night, and we look at the data points they provided to us and we say, hey, if you could follow this pathway, you could achieve your outcome. There's a strong possibility you can achieve your outcome. The client says, yeah, let's go, I understand it. And then life happens. And the client begins making decisions with emotions. And as that decision comes about, you see that it's going to derail the client from their long-term objectives. But yet, if you mention it to the client, perhaps they get offended. Perhaps they're grateful for you. Perhaps they leave as a client because how dare you speak to them in this way? As a financial advisor, you carry a weight of secrets, of emotions, of goals. So much you carry within your person, and before you know it, you've lost that joy. You've been drained by clients, by the very people that you very deeply are concerned for, the very people that perhaps you love. They begin draining you. Maybe now's the time to niche. There's another warning that you might consider, and that is that the business of advice is bogging you down. So many of us came into the industry in order to change people's lives. The very fact that we could sit down and listen to somebody, understand where they want to be, their aspirations, their dreams, we know their challenges, man, that excites many of us. Before you know it, we begin being stifled with compliance, regulators, books and records, payroll, employees. The business, if we're not careful, will soon bog us down because there are so many things on the business side that are important that we have to deal with that many times don't directly impact that advisor-client conversation, those very intimate, private conversations where we can help a client move in the direction of their goals. And so the RIA, the business itself, can begin bogging us down. And you may be looking, saying, how can I get more efficient? On Michael Kitces' blog, Nerd's Eye View, he had a guest contributor, Michael LaCours, who was a CFP. He's also the co-founder of FP Pathfinder. He made an amazing statement. He said, and I quote, "As financial advisor firms grow and accumulate more and more clients over time, the increased client load carries a growing pressure to find ways to be more efficient to scale the business. Yet the challenge is that with an ever-growing client base, whereas each different client has different needs, and where advisory firms often differentiate themselves by providing individualized and customized services to the differing needs of every client, it becomes increasingly difficult to systematize the business, precisely because the level of variability from one client to the next makes it difficult or impossible to scale efficiently. Man, well said. Let's say it again. What Michael's referring to is this. Every client wants to be treated as an individual. And then to shift our minds from an individual who has this particular profession and this particular dream to this particular A, B, C, D, E, F. All of a sudden now you're dealing with 27, 28, 30 different types of client caricatures or personas. It is very hard to scale. It's very hard to provide the client with what they desire, much less you, the business owner. So when your business begins bogging you down, it may be a time for you to consider niching. So there's two ideas there. First one is you're getting drained. The second one is you can't scale effectively. You see, there's a psychological thing that happens in our head to where we begin getting passionate about saying, yes, you're the right client for me, as opposed to saying, no, you're not the right fit for me. Henry Ford made this statement. I remember hearing it for the first time from my mother, who was a reader like I am. She used to say the statement, and she always attributed it to Henry Ford. Sometimes she would say Sam Walton. But Henry Ford said, sell to the classes, eat with the masses. Sell to the masses, eat with the classes. What does that mean? I can remember the way I was taught is, son, if you can build a business that services thousands of people versus 2 or 3, you'll make more money. Which, a lot of truth to that. Sell to the masses, eat with the classes. It's a simple concept. And it's relevant. It's a relevant business strategy, specifically when we're talking about niching. You see, continuing to work with a large, varied book, you can put whatever qualifiers you want on those two words, large and varied. But as we work with a large and varied book, it creates a difficulty for us to scale. There's a principle called the attractiveness principle. And basically what it means is you can't be all things to all people. According to the systems thinker, they said, and I quote, if you offer the best, sidebar, whatever you think that may mean, on every competitive dimension, the market will swamp you with so much demand that you will eventually become less attractive in certain areas. And this is so true. On the other hand, instead of trying to be the best to everybody, if we begin to work with a niche, a specific niche, you're able to whittle down from anybody who can fog a mirror to a much smaller client list. But they could generate for you higher revenue, leading to hyper efficiency in your firm. Then you can more easily achieve the 8-figure exit. You see, friends, the alternative to being drained out, being drained by our clients, or the alternative to letting our business eat us, is to take control, to create systems and processes around very scalable models. One of the very first things you can do to scale your company is to whittle down or become super niched in the type of client that you desire to work with. Let me give you a warning though. Choosing a niche has very little to do, in my opinion, with the goal of gaining investable assets. So for you as a financial advisor, very little to do with gaining investable assets. Instead, choosing a niche is all about who the niche is, what drives them, and how you relate to them. See, Justin, I don't understand. Aren't we in the business to make money? Absolutely. Absolutely. I often say that if I'm going to work, I want to make money. If I'm not going to work, then I want to make money. Yes, we're in the business to make money. But In doing so, if we become toxic within our own person, if we lose the focus of the help that we are trying to provide to clients on a regular basis, if we lose the client first mentality, then we're doomed to fail. The reality is niching is all about who can you serve most effectively. Whenever I say effectively, I mean with all the passion, with all the vim and vigor, as my grandma used to say, with everything in your fiber, all of God's given gifts that you have, how can you serve them? If you can identify the people or the people group or the classification, whatever your demographic is, that aligns with your core ethos, then you'll never work a day in your life. It becomes not about you and niching. It becomes about helping and serving those whom you truly care about. I mentioned my daughter being born. I can remember in that moment saying, I like working with business owners. Not just any business owner. I like working with business owners in the service industry. I don't really jive with business owners who are in manufacturing. I know many, and they have solid businesses. It just doesn't do it for me. I can remember business owners who had retail stores. Man, they serve the communities great, but they just didn't jive with me. I can remember specifically the conversation I had with myself saying, I like working with business owners. I like working with business owners who are like me. They like God's outdoors. They like to hunt, fish, play golf. I like working with business owners who have families. Perhaps they have children. Perhaps they have grandchildren. Their families are a vital part of their lives. See, I know business owners that, man, they're solid business owners for the service industry, but yet they don't have any family. Their business is their family. And I don't jive with that personality type. Great people. I have several friends of mine in the industry that work with business owners that don't have family types. But for me, it was, I want to work with business owners who have families. You know, many times I've quoted Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, where he talks about get the right people on the bus. And oftentimes when we use that connotation, we use it in the same light that Jim Collins was writing the book, and that was talking specifically about employees. Which team members can we get on the bus? But the reality is that we need to have the right clientele on the bus too. You know, and as we're growing to this 8-figure exit, if we have this hodgepodge of clients, we're not going to get the efficiency or the scale that we desire for the 8-figure exit. Let me ask you a question. You've been in business now for some time. If you could pick that one client that you just like, maybe you go so as far as saying, I love this family. This individual has been amazing to work with. Do you see them? Can you see their face? Maybe you've talked to them recently on the phone. What attributes does that individual possess that you wish all the other clients possessed? Whenever I look at my clientele over the last years, I could write out a list of the things that I like about this particular client. In fact, we've spoken about this on the podcast. I did this exercise. I walked through and I said, I like Frazzled Frank. Frazzled Frank. And we built this entire persona around who Frazzled Frank is. I can remember talking to my team, guys, I like Frazzled Frank, and here's why. And as I began talking about Frazzled Frank, I began smiling. I began thinking about the laughter we had, the jabs that he and I throw at each other just when we're doing our work together, how our wives just shake their head at us like you guys are Fruit Loops. And to me, it's fun. When we think about this idea of niching, it's all about, as Jim Collins said, let's get that Frazzled Frank for me on the bus. How many of them can we get on the bus? You see, it becomes a game at some point, fun game, to where you're seeking and you're searching for this ideal client that allows you to niche. Now, when we think about niching, there's two different ways that we can impact niching. And one is scaling versus being hyper-focused. We can scale our companies or we can be hyper-focused. What's the difference between scaling a business for a large number of clients or being hyper-focused with a specific niche? You see, we can scale the companies and we can say, hey, I'm only going to work with dentists, or I'm going to work with entrepreneur doctors, which may include dentists and veterinarians and chiropractors and those MDs who own their own businesses. Maybe you say, I'm going to work with entrepreneur doctors. That's cool. You can create a scaled business that has an influx form that allows you to work with hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneur doctors. That's a scaling style business. Or you could say, I'm only going to work with entrepreneur doctors who are dentists, who like to hunt, who like to fish, who have kids between the ages of 10 and 15, and keep on making a list. Scale Up Nation describes scaling your company as this, and I quote, an entrepreneur venture that has achieved product market fit and now faces either the second valley of death or exponential growth. What are they saying? You've reached a point in your business to where your business is sustainable. Maybe if you're looking at the J curve, or if you're tracking through the financials, you have a J curve, and now you're going into maturity, which is where you're not seeing 25, 30, 40% growth rates. You're now seeing 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, more of a mature business growth rate, and it's trending in almost like an upward swoosh type of emotion on a graph. And unless you do something, you're going to have atrophy. So what scaling does is it says, hey, how can we do more of the same? Whereas if we're going to be hyper-niched or hyper-focused to a specific niche, what you're then looking for is saying, how can I understand every single pain point, every emotional rationale, every decision-making sticking point or movement of this particular niche? I was reading a quote by Ryan Townsley. Ryan Townsley is an RA owner, and he was a former nuclear engineer. And he said it best when he says, niches are not for everyone, which is so true. Niches are not for everyone, and that's okay if it's not your vision. However, consider the efficiency you gain with the more niche focus and how it helps you and your clients. You see, Townsley in his early days attempted to serve anybody and everybody, just like so many of us did. And it wasn't until he became hyper-focused helping nuclear power plant professionals. Think about this. He was a former nuclear engineer. Who better could speak with nuclear power plant professionals than a former nuclear engineer? And once he became hyper-niche to that passion that he had, he then watched his firm grow at over $50 million in AUM in just 4 years, from nothing to just a sizable business, because he became niche with his passion. So how do we make the transition? How do we make the transition? More than likely, you have been helping anybody and everybody. And as you look at your pool, as you look at your client base, you're saying, okay, here are my families. Here are my little old lady clients. I still have clients that changed my diapers when I was a kid. They're not business owners. But here are my core clients that I'm just going to forever work with. And they're your legacy clients is what I call them. Then here are all the others. Many of them you may like. Many of them may have been your first clients in your business. But yet they're not the right client fit for you to achieve your 8-figure exit. What do? There's a few things you could do. You could sell those clients that aren't fitting your current niche. You could sell them outright to another RIA. There's pros and cons to that. You could bring in an advisor that you could train, that you could trust to work with just those clients that don't fit your particular niche. That's what I did. I brought in advisors to say, hey, this particular client is not a business owner, but they need some help. I know you'll care for them. Then I was able to be there alongside them whenever the clients need to see Justin for whatever reason. You could totally just walk away from those clients, move them to house accounts, or just delink them from your platform. Probably not the wisest move. Probably also going to go back on some of the representations that you made that you're going to try to help them achieve their goals. So to me, one of the best ways to make a transition is to bring in somebody who that client, who may not be your best client today, but they can be your associate's best client. That's a great move. Once you segment your book and you can say, hey, here are my legacy clients. I'll forever work with these clients. This group of clients here, I'm going to move to a colleague or to an associate, and I'll make sure they're being well taken care of. And then now I'm going to focus 100% of my efforts on this niche clientele. Whenever you can reach that point, what happens is exponential. As soon as you identify clearly who you want to work with, exponential growth once again takes place. Again, back to my J curve. You begin with a business, you have a J, you go a little bit into negative, and then you go through this great upswing of revenue production. You have unbelievable growth, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% growth rates year over year. And then all of a sudden you plateau. And if you're not careful, you're going to atrophy. What you're doing through niching is you're going to go back through another hyper growth phase of your business. Once you identify the niche you want to work with, there's a marketing strategy that you want to think about. It's often referred to as the 4-second rule. Now, we're going to take some liberty with the way the 4-second rule is actually applied, but the 4-second rule is a good backdrop for you as a business owner, specifically a financial advisor, on how to niche your practice. The 4-second rule basically means this. Anybody who visits your website should be able to recognize your niche or your specialization within 4 seconds of visiting your website. That's right. If you work with business owners, you should be able to tell that, hey, you work with business owners within 4 seconds. If you work with retirees, you should be able to tell within 4 seconds you work with retirees. If you work with people who sew pink polka dotted handbags, within 4 seconds, you should be able to tell, hey, I work with people who sew pink polka dotted handbags. But that 4-second rule is not only applicable to your website, it should also be applicable to your elevator speech, your quick 10-minute, your social media, your email signature, the signage on your building. Everything about you and your company should identify the 4-second rule. So let's think about this. You know you want to niche. You know you need to niche. You burn out. You're fatigued. The company is driving you crazy. The operational side of the business is driving you crazy. And it's like, I've got to do something or I'm never going to achieve my 8-figure exit. Okay. Look at your current client mix and who is your favorite customer. Not who produces the most money. Who is your favorite customer and why? How old are they? Are they married? Do they have kids? What are their hobbies? What's their favorite TV show? How do they vote? Where do they live? What is their favorite drink? Favorite food? Who's their favorite team? Do they watch sports? The more that you can identify about this persona, this favorite customer that you have, the more detailed you can get, and you're now able to build a marketing plan that reaches directly into them. You'll understand their pain points. You'll understand what keeps them up at night. And whenever you meet with them, you're already going to know what they're thinking. You're going to know their objections. You're going to know their passions. You're going to know their fears. And you're going to be able to speak to them not as a salesperson, not as a business owner, but as a confidant, somebody who understands where they're coming from. Just this last week, I was talking with a business owner. I was interested in engaging this particular owner for services. And we were talking. And before I even asked my questions, they presented to me on a screen the questions that I had. And I sat back and I listened. I knew I was going to be doing this podcast. I listened and I chuckled. And I said, I'm your perfect client, aren't I? And they said, to a T. I said, your marketing works very well. You knew all my questions. You know my concerns. You know my fears. When did this happen for you? When did you make this change in your business? And this particular business owner said, about 6 years ago, we sat down and we said, we have to do something different. I'm not happy. Just like I did after my daughter was born. I'm not happy. I don't like this. If I'm going to do this next 20, 30 years of my life, I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And this business owner said, I remember about 6 years ago, I wasn't happy. And I said, I want to do this and this thing only. And I want to become the best in the country at this. And they are number one in the country. working with specifically with somebody like me. I'm their target demographic. That didn't happen by accident. Me showing up on their website, scheduling an appointment, having their first appointment, having my questions answered before I even had the opportunity to ask my questions, that wasn't an accident. It was the decision of a business owner some years back to say, okay, we played this game, we'll work with anybody who'll fog a mirror. Now it's time to work with people who we want to work with. And as a result, not only have I seen the benefits and an 8-figure exit because of niching, I also saw this business owner in a totally unrelated profession reach the pinnacle of their business, number one in the country, as a direct result of a decision 6 years ago to become an expert in this one thing. And this one thing affords them more clients than they can actually serve, but yet it provides them satisfaction in career, satisfaction in job. Scale is there, and ultimately, friends, the 8-figure exit is there. So let me ask you, is now the time for you to niche? Are you tired of working with anybody and everybody? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. This is no judgment zone here. If you want an 8-figure exit, should you consider the possibility of streamlining your client portfolio? Should you consider becoming hyper niched within one or two key areas of your client base? Look, you got to trust your instincts. Change is hard. It is. But oftentimes you know within your person that change is needed. Perhaps, just perhaps, you've had an experience like I've had. Whenever I sit down, my daughter's up in the hospital, Children's Hospital. She's in an incubator, and I'm sitting there meeting with this client. I'm like, I'm not going to do this forever. Nope, I'm done. Maybe it's an epiphany. Maybe it's a moment. Maybe it's a calculated decision where you're like, look, we have enough margin now. It's time for us to begin moving the company into a different direction. The key for all of us, if we're going to achieve an 8-figure exit, is to become hyper efficient in scale in everything we do. And friends, niching is one of those things that you could use to help drive your business at an 8-figure exit. If you need help, reach out. We have a group of people who can help you. Until next time, y'all go out and make it a great day.